My name is Samara O'Gorman. I'm an interviewer and researcher with the CIMPN. And today I'm joined by Myriam Cloutier, the Director of Heritage Programs at the Mount Royal Cemetery. Thank you for taking the time to speak to me today about the cemetery and a little bit about its connection to Irish heritage here in Quebec before we have our tour in the spring altogether. Um, my first question would be for those watching right now, would you say a couple of words about yourself? Introduce yourself. What is your role at the cemetery? I know that the Friends of the Mount Royal Cemetery has been active since 1998, but with your role, you're probably working on some fascinating preservation projects right now. So tell us a bit about what you're working on, your role at the cemetery. Go ahead.
Okay. So I've been working at the Montreal Cemetery since 1995. So it's been 31
Wow.
years. So I'm in charge of everything that pertains to the history of the place. The cemetery was founded in 1852. We are going to celebrate our 175th anniversary next year. So there's a lot of history. I'm the coordinator of the Friends of the Montreal Cemetery. So I'm in charge of all the efforts that we make to preserve the history. So the restoration of old monuments, of mausoleums, of old cast iron fences. Um, I I collect a lot of historical information because every summer I do historical walking tours in the cemetery, and each of them has a theme.
Mhm.
So I try to change the subjects. So I talk sometimes about the politicians in the cemetery or the athletes, the artists. So uh, those tours are appreciated, I think, because the people that I talk about are people that ring a bell to the people attending the tours. They recognize the names, but they don't know who they really were. So I think that's where the interest comes from. Like, because you say the word, they say, "Oh yes, I think I know this," and then I take a few minutes to tell the story. So. Yeah, there's
Absolutely.
a lot of history in the Montreal Cemetery.
I'm sure. And it was, this leads perfectly into my next question. It was designated as a National Historic Site because it's an example, I believe, of a 19th century rural
Rural
cemetery movement.
Cemetery.
Yeah,
Yes,
where like they came out of this trend of moving out of cramped churchyards
exactly.
into like more park, serene settings.
Yes.
Could you tell me a bit about that movement and how it relates to the Mount Royal
Yeah.
Cemetery?
What happened in Montreal happened in all the American cities and in many European cities where the first cemeteries were located in the middle of the cities. So they became crowded. They lacked space. So in the mid 1800s, the new trend was to move those cemeteries, to close them, exhume the people, and open new cemeteries on the outskirts of the city. So that's exactly what happened in Montreal. There were two Protestant cemeteries downtown Montreal, and they closed, and Montreal Cemetery became the new Protestant cemetery of the city.
Okay. Wow. You mentioned your walking tours
Yes.
briefly. I'm excited to attend one in the summer. I'm wondering what tour theme do you think resonates with Montrealers most days, or is there one that's the most popular? We've been
Um,
talking about the rural cemetery movement. Maybe there's a tour based around that, or is it based around a particular figure?
um, Hard to tell, but I think the tour that I have repeated the most is the tour on women buried in the cemetery, because it's been 31 years that I collect information. And in the first years that I was working, I could only find interesting on famous men buried in the cemetery. But as years went by, new books were being written, and then I discovered a lot of great women buried in the cemetery. So I started doing a tour on women late. But people enjoyed it so much that every 3 or 4 years I repeat it, and I'm able to add new women in the tour each time because of the new research that has been done on outstanding women buried in the cemetery.
So it's a never-ending story and job for you.
Exactly. That's what's exciting about my job, is that it's like I'm always looking for new people and new information. I receive the help of a lot of families. Like I meet families for
Yeah.
genealogy. Like I help them with their family tree, and that's often how I find out about new people that I didn't know of that I can then include in my tours.
Wonderful. To segue from that, I think we can talk about a bit about the Irish connection now.
Sure.
Uh, Montreal, as you know, has such a deep-rooted Irish history, especially because of the Great Irish Famine on Gortamore. Um, I know that many Irish immigrants at the time, they were tragically buried in mass graves, but how are the Irish represented in the Mount Royal Cemetery? I know one figure, William Workman, the former
Mhm.
Montreal mayor, is buried there. And many others, they're so-called merchant princes of Montreal. They were largely Irish Protestants at the time. They found their resting place in the Montreal Cemetery, where on the other side of the spectrum, the Montreal Catholic Irish are largely in the neighboring Côte-des-Neiges,
Mhm.
Notre-Dame-des-Neiges Cemetery.
Yes.
So maybe speak a bit about that, any influential figures that come to your mind to the
Uh,
forefront.
So the cemetery was founded in 1852. That was
Hmm.
when there were a lot of Irish immigrants coming to Montreal, a lot of English and a lot of Scottish immigrants.
Yes.
So we have, in our old sections, we have a lot of people that were not born in Montreal. They were born in Europe and arrived here, and it was very popular then to write where you came from. So in
Hmm.
the sections that we have that are from the mid 1800s, you always see the town where they came from, and you could tell it was important for them to say that even though they were now Montrealers, the place where they came from was important. So you see, you can feel it when you walk in the historical sections. For example, there are a lot of Celtic crosses.
Hmm.
So again, it was a way to show where they came from, to show their Celtic heritage. So the Montreal Cemetery is non-profit. So in the 1800s, a lot of burials took place free of charge. We had a free ground where you could be buried if you had no family or no money. So we have the working class immigrants buried in the cemetery. So that they're everywhere. So we have the wealthy sections where
Okay.
as you were talking about those merchants who became very wealthy. So they're there, but we also have the working class people who had a tough life, and a lot of children died very young in the 1800s. So because of epidemics and the bad water, but the bad milk, and
Mhm.
so we have children's section for those babies. So it's really fascinating to walk around, and if you take the time to look around, you see all that. You see the children's section, you see where the people came from just from looking at their monument and the mention of where they came from. So the Irish are everywhere. They're in the wealthy sections, but they're in the free sections. Like
Yeah.
we also have a big lot that belongs to the Protestant Irish Benevolent Society.
Yes.
So a lot of burials took place there in the lot. So that was another way, like if a family couldn't afford to pay for the burial fees, they could reach out to a church organization or to the Protestant Irish Benevolent Society and get a space in their lot.
Okay, so the cemetery itself is much more diverse than I originally thought it was. Yes, there's people from all sorts of
Oh,
backgrounds
yes, yes,
of Irish
yes.
heritage. Okay, wonderful. And are there I'm wondering, any hidden stories or forgotten figures of people of Irish descent that you're working to bring more light to in your cemetery? Or you talked a bit about the children's section. Are there any figures or certain gravestones that maybe pull on your heartstrings, Miriam, a bit, or your favorite part in
Um,
the
there
cemetery?
are many, like some one person that when I talk about him, people get excited is Joe Beef.
Mm.
He's Irish, and he came to Montreal, and he decided to stay here, and he opened a tavern in the old port, and he became a legend. He was such an unusual person. Everybody knew his name, and when his funeral took place, like the whole city closed for the afternoon. It was a very big deal. But nowadays, very few people know that he really existed. There's a restaurant in Montreal now named the Joe Beef Restaurant, but
Yes.
it has nothing to do with the man. So when I talk about the fact that he was real, that he really existed, people are very surprised. We also have a young man. His name was Thomas Hackett, and
Mm.
he was in the middle of a big conflict between the Protestant Irish and the Catholic Irish of Montreal, and he was murdered in the 1870s because of the conflict between the two groups. So that's an interesting stop too during the tours, when it gives me the opportunity to talk about that. Like in the mid 1800s, all the newly arrived immigrants, it was still dear to their hearts, like what was going on in their country. So even here, their identity was important, and unfortunately, a lot of conflicts
Mhm.
occurred because of that. So Thomas Hackett is one example. And his monument is located very close to the entrance. And it's a very peaceful monument. It's a nice statue of a woman. And like, if you just looked at the monument, you wouldn't know for who it is. But there's a long epitaph on the monument that mentions what happened. So
Wonderful.
I could go on and on and on like
No,
this.
I'm
Like there are
sure.
many, like we have two mayors of Montreal. William Workman, that you
Yeah.
mentioned, was Irish. There's another one called Richard Wilson Smith, who was Irish. And we also have the mayor, John Easton Mills, who was not Irish, he was American. I don't know originally where his family came from, but he was the mayor when many Irish immigrants came to Montreal, and they had ship fever. So something had to be done to put them in somewhere. They were so sick arriving, they couldn't take care of themselves. So that mayor, John Easton Mills, took care of them, and he built barracks close to where Victoria Bridge is now. And
Mhm.
there were a lot of victims, unfortunately. Many of them were buried there. And he died of typhus. So he contracted the sickness, helping those newly arrived Montrealers. And that's why there's a big rock now there.
Yes, of
That big
course. Yeah.
rock that pays tribute to the
The Black Rock.
yeah, exactly. So that it was John Easton Mills, the mayor at the time all that happened, and he's buried in the cemetery.
Wow. So you could really make a full day out of it, is what I'm
Oh, yes,
hearing.
for sure.
I don't want to ask you too many questions or dive too much in the history because again, we're planning to come see you in the spring when it's not as
Sure.
cold. Um, for my last question today, I want to ask, what is the best way that people could support your ongoing preservation or heritage programs, or sign up to the upcoming tours?
They can go on the website of the Montreal Cemetery. There's a section for the Friends of the Montreal Cemetery. It talks about all the projects that we do and the tours. We usually promote the tours starting in the spring, so nothing is announced at this time, but in
Okay.
the mid-April, will have a whole list of the dates for the upcoming summer. And people can also give donations to the summit, to the Friends. And with the funds that we raise, we repair monuments, we repaint inscriptions on monuments. Every year we have a lot of things we want to accomplish to promote and preserve the history.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Miriam, for your time today. The work that you're doing, it ensures that stories and history aren't just buried, they're told for future generations, myself included. So I
Mhm.
thank you very much. And for those watching today, this was just a taste of a longer video that we're planning with the CIMPN and Miriam. We'll conduct it later on in the year when it's warmer outside. And we could really dive into the history much more than we did today about the Mount Royal Cemetery. So thank you so much, Miriam, for your time. And thanks everyone for watching. Slancha. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.